Hi, I'm Amit Thakur, managing partner with 𝐌𝐿𝐀 Vietnam. It's been about 5 years in Vietnam, and it's been a great journey. And I would like to welcome you to the first series of MMA Talk Hub 2023. And with me, we have joined by Thue Quist, CEO of Decision Lab Vietnam. And welcome to MMA Talk Hub. So we were chatting before, right? And I discovered that you were actually in Vietnam as a kid, and you actually started a business by yourself. Tell us more about that.
So when I came to Vietnam at the beginning of the 90s, my mom, she was here in a UN project supporting returning refugees to Vietnam. So I found myself as a 9-year-old in Hue in central Vietnam. And I think it was my Vietnamese teacher there that inspired me within everything entrepreneurial. She, of course, was trading a little bit land, a little bit gold here and there, had her own shop and so on. So I also wanted to start something. So we started scouting for a place to make Hue's first burger restaurant.
Wow, and I can see that's where the entrepreneur skills were being the seed was sown, and that really shows the fact that in being in Vietnam for 15 years now, and you have founded Decision Lab, and before that, 𝐿 and what inspired you to start these businesses and try to understand from your journey in Vietnam and before that, before we move on to really discussing the topic of the day?
Yeah. So I think from the beginning, it was driven mainly by entrepreneurship. I was studying in Hong Kong and came to Vietnam to complete my thesis. And in doing that, I was interviewing different companies that started to outsource IT. To Vietnam, and what is always there was a great opportunity to do something in this space, and I contacted my good friend 𝐂𝐿𝐀, who was working in this company 𝐿𝐼𝐼𝐻 back in Denmark, who was doing market research for a lot of companies in Denmark and the Nordics, and we looked at the opportunities for starting something up in Vietnam, and we presented a business plan. Finally, they said, this is an amazing idea. Let's do this. Then they looked again, they looked at us, and we were both 24 years old. So they completely scrapped the idea, and then we had to fight our way back. And by the end of the day, then we were able to set up 𝐿𝐼𝐻 here, where at that time, the market was still coming together. There was not that much market research being done in Vietnam. But we managed to build it up based on this case of also outsourcing processes. Few years later, we decided to do a management buyout of the consulting activities, the local market activities, and that was then what laid the foundation to Decision Lab, as we know.
Awesome. Yeah, and we've been hearing about your presence through the Decision Lab in the industry forums, the way you've been contributing, to some of the challenges that the leaders face today, right? And moving into that, something that both of us have been facing in our own environment, whether it's the market research or from a media agency point of view, and a lot of leaders that we both talk to from people who manage large businesses or small businesses, that the most critical thing that a leader has to go through almost every day is decision making, right? And whether it's strategic decision or tactical or even operational or people-led decisions, it has become even more critical today, right? Given the fact that there are so many dynamics involved, so much of data involved today, and especially after the pandemic, how things have evolved. Decision-making has to be agile. Decision-making has to be more prudent in terms of what impact will it have in future, right? So with the known fact that that is how things are evolving, and that's where decision making is important even more for the leaders in today's time, I would want to ask you that how would you see these decision-making evolved over the past few years, especially after pandemic? And how does Decision Lab contribute or help and support the leaders today when they make these critical decisions?
Yeah, I think it's a very, very interesting question. And I think also when it comes to our ability to predict and to make decisions as leaders, the pandemic has continued. I mean, it has been a 3-year period of volatility and uncertainty, and you can say if we I mean, I speak at several events where I'm asked to predict the future, right? And I think if one thing holds true, in these past 3 years is that any important event has been unpredictable. So you could almost say, is there any way to try to predict the future?
Okay.
And I think a lot of the research that has been done on managing in volatile times, managing when things are unpredictable, it doesn't lead to the conclusion that you shouldn't do research, but it leads to the conclusion that you need to be much more agile in the way you work.
That's right. Yeah.
And what we try to do at Decision Lab, and what we have done basically since 2020 when we partnered with YouGov, is to try and bring tools that enable a more agile way of doing research. So much more of the work we do now is not based on surveys we need to initiate, but is based on ongoing data points, data that we track every day.
Got it.
So we see, for example, when we work with brand tracking,
that
typically brands in Vietnam, maybe every half year, even every year, they would get a report that's 3 years old where they can see how they're performing as a brand. And I think today, with both increased competition, but also changes in consumer behavior that happens all the time, you need to both be able to get faster readings, but you also need to understand the fluidity of your brand.
That's true.
How it evolves in an environment with your own communication, your competitors' communication, and the changing macro environment. So that's really what we are trying to both provide, but also to explain to the market that this is really the way to go.
So I think you mentioned a very important point, the fact that there is continuity of data, right? And that continuity possibly gives more robustness to the way that data is staggered and how changes have been seen over a period of year, and then making decision based on those changes and what to expect in future, right? And specifically, you spoke about brand health measurement, right? And that is something that we both deal with on our daily basis. So tell us more about that. Tell us, how do you think any instance where that decision was taken based on those brand health metrics and tracking over a period of time, and that changed how that brand actually fared after that?
Yeah, so I think branding for companies from Vietnam is a relatively new discipline, right? And I think Vietnam really has a need to develop more local brands, to develop basically their companies and to export more. And I think what is interesting when we work with tracking over time is that we can also clearly, through our time series analysis, etc., we can clearly see which elements has an effect on customer acquisition. And I think there's not a marketer today who have not dealt with the question from a CEO about does it really work, right?
Correct.
Dealt with it even worse, the question from the sales director, right? On why are we making money to pay for whatever you are doing, right?
Absolutely.
And I think what is interesting here is that I think what the outside world often sees as branding is that creating, our Apple brand or Coca-Cola brand, right? But branding consists of a lot of different elements.
That's right.
And it boils down to reputation. It boils down to building loyal customers, etc. And that has a different value in different sectors. No one can live without any of these components. So I see it really as our job to, with concrete analysis and data, to showcase what are the elements of your brand that you need to focus on in order to build your business. I think it has been interesting to follow, for example, with e-commerce in Vietnam. And e-commerce is particularly interesting because it's many of the players are regional as well. So we can compare to how Lazada and Shopee are doing as brands in Singapore, in Indonesia, Malaysia, compared to Vietnam. And this is an industry that's typically very performance focused, right? Very driven. Now we're seeing a situation where funds are drying a little bit up, and by the end of the day, the strongest ones will be able to stand in this competition. And I think what we've seen over time with Shopee and Lazada building these brands in Vietnam, building up equity, and I believe in the future months when they are having maybe a little bit less budget for advertising, we will really see the effect of having a strong brand, having a strong reputation, customers believing in the quality, the ability to deliver over time, the ability to bring consistently valuable products, and that will prove valuable for these businesses.
Awesome. Everything that you shared is so relevant in today's time because we face these decisions, or how do we move forward on a daily basis when we work and we decide media for our brands as well, right? But the interesting thing that you mentioned is, and I wanted to spend a little more time to understand that when these brand health track measurements are taken care of, right, there are few things that goes underneath, right, which is the panel itself. The fact that a lot of consumption on digital media has grown significantly in the last few years in Vietnam. Consumers have evolved using their mobile phones, using apps on mobile phones. How has the change in all this change incorporated in the way you track, brand health track, of this change in behavior from the consumer? And is it fair to assume that this is reflected well when advertisers today look at the brand health track, that it does take into account the changing consumer behavior? If we were to look at a media pattern, for example, how they're consuming media, because that has a direct impact on how brands today decide that they want to invest in certain platform to connect with the consumer.
So you see, when you're doing research, questionnaire-based quantitative research, you ask people what they recall, right? And I think therefore it's in many ways the naked truth of have you weighted impression. We're not tracking attribution here, but we are tracking basically what is the total impact on your brand, and that goes across platforms, across partnerships, across your ability to create a trustworthy message. So I think underlying that there is a whole battle of trying to really come through with your message. And I think we're going to discuss that a little bit more, right, in terms of how do we then analyze that, because that really requires new techniques.
To understand. And in fact, because sometimes the fact of how consumers actually like the brand or not is very directly shown in the way they experience a brand and they purchase a brand, right? And you talked about how e-commerce is evolving here and the amount of data that is used on a daily basis to grow the business.
Yeah.
So when we look at something like e-commerce, is there something different the way they track their businesses? Because it is very agile, very quick. They need to deliver a lot more focus on delivery on a more continuous basis versus a long-term growth business where there's a cycle, let's say of an FMCG product, or a monthly cycle or weekly cycle that you predict, and you know how sales are going to come in. So is there a difference that you have observed in the way these two businesses track their brands or how they invest?
So I think most FMCG companies in Vietnam, they will track their brands in a more traditional way.
Correct.
And for me, it's a bit of a question of whether this whole model of planning your campaign, building it up, testing it, launching, and then evaluating afterwards and see how it goes, whether, that is because of traditions in way of working, or whether it's actually beneficial to the cycle there. Because, we live in a time where communication is always on, where communication happens back to the company, across, and so on. So I think, FMCG has been, the heroes in creating today's way of marketing. But I think there is also a time where maybe they need to look a little bit at other sectors today that are doing smaller campaigns, that are more looking at managing their reputation overall. And I would think that sector will be a little bit under pressure in the coming years to change that model, both in terms of the model of how they execute their marketing, how they communicate, but also in terms of how they manage their reputation, how they build, trustworthiness, originality into their brands.
Correct. And the fact that digital consumption from a consumer lens is evolving, at the same time, there's a huge platformization that's happening around, right? And especially in Vietnam, the growth that we have seen in commerce, the growth that we have seen in social media presence itself, and the new formats, whether it's watching on connected TV, the same content, or a new content on OTT. So there is a significant change that's happening. How do you, from a measurement industry point of view, right? How do you make sure that this new formats, this new change, new platform, they're all included so that the advertisers or brand owners get a holistic understanding of how the brand is making or evolving?
So I think everything we do surrounds how can we be a good market research agency for Vietnam. And therefore, in the past few years, we've been publishing every quarter this report called the Connected Consumer, where we follow how the Vietnamese population is getting ever more connected. And maybe the fact that they're getting connected is the only thing that can't grow anymore, because the Vietnamese population is really, really connected nowadays. And I think it's a quite good example also when we spoke about FMCG and connecting, why is the media landscape changing? Why is the sales landscape changing? And what do you need to do to counter that? And I think in our latest reports, some of the recent things that's come up is especially in the area of reels and shorts. So I think there's not an ambitious brand manager or marketeer in Vietnam that hasn't looked into this format. But we're really seeing now that every social media channel is pitching in on this. TikTok is losing a little bit the advantage there. We see Facebook to a higher degree taking over. So it's an interesting space where we can see this is really something that will continue to power how to connect with consumers for quite some time, but a little bit in a more diverse range of platforms. But speaking about TikTok, right? What has been a little bit interesting to see this time around is how fast this whole new buzzword of shoppertainment is taking hold in Vietnam.
That's right.
Yeah, because e-commerce has been fighting a little bit to get back their buzz from the COVID times where they were really, really growing. And what we're seeing now is some stabilization for those platforms, but TikTok Shop growing dramatically quarter over quarter. I'm sure this is going to have an effect on the big e-commerce players, etc. People are going to pitch into this, but it is nonetheless interesting to see that as the lead factor driving how people they shop online. And I think it should also drive how brands are using their KOLs, because suddenly, there's a whole sales system surrounding KOL, and you need to react to that in a new way.
That's right. I think, again, the fact that these platforms are coming up and, even at the way we plan media, the way we invest and use these platforms to connect for our brands is so new. Because the way we are looking at the journey is the fact that each platform has its own strength where they excel and, which is unique, let's say, compared to somebody else. And a lot of these mediums and platforms have been used to connect directly with the consumers, putting out a brand message there and driving reach or driving awareness. But in recent times, some of these platforms have evolved in a way that they actually engage with the consumer. They actually are able to tell a story, right? And you made a good point of short and reels, because in today's times, I have a son who's a teenager now, and he has really no time to look for long content. They are all looking for short content, and that short content consumption makes all these platforms launch a new format. So it is challenging for us also to decide how to make sure that the brand's message is still said in a way that it is well accepted. And just the experience that people have had for decades when they go out for shopping with family, with friends, if it was not just shopping. And when I speak to the friends in the e-commerce industry, that's exactly what they want to create. So again, the shoppertainment point is very clearly landing into the space where it is not only about shopping, but creating a connection, engagement, giving them more besides just buying a product, a holistic experience, and that's shoppertainment. But if we are able to measure those and put our buck behind saying whether it is working or not, that's where we all depend on the solution that you have. So are there any specific metrics that you look at when you go back to the brand and saying, which one of these are working, which formats work, and from a revenue standpoint, because some of these are directly related to sales?
So I think we've always worked in the space, and I think that goes for both of us, where we have a little bit more been helping the companies that are not naturally online. Because e-commerce, they live in a world of data. They get the data points on everything, and they can optimize performance, right? But But I think more of the clients that you and we work with, they have this challenge of what exactly should I measure? How do I bring my product online? And I think when we look at the shop attainment, it's actually interesting because it might actually solve some of the things we've been looking for clients that have been used to selling their products through retail or through spaces where you can create a better experience with the product.
Correct.
It's just a completely new way, but I think it might give answers to some of those questions.
Okay.
The challenge now is in this world where we use new channels, emerging channels, etc., is in terms of how do we track the effectiveness of this.
Good.
And we had we were the first ones in Vietnam to introduce a cookie-based tracking of do you reach your target audience? How effective are you in building your brand? Do you generate brand lifts, and do you finally generate purchase? But now a lot of that got challenged, and that's why I like being an independent agency, because then we can shift our partners, right? So a lot of that got challenged when the GDPR happened, when the cookieless environments were more and more introduced, when the Apple smartphones will no longer accept the tracking, right? So we are a little bit in going from a world of where digital could track everything to a space where it actually becomes really difficult to compare. And what we have done recently is then to partner with Meta in this area, because Meta has interestingly jumped into the arena of marketing mix modeling.
Okay.
And I think with marketing mix modeling, we are taking a little bit a step back in time to when we talked about marketing mix as a beginning of every campaign planning, right? And that was a much more important part of strategy development. Now I think we're taking a step back and trying to see how can we measure the ad spend, the partnerships, all the activities we do in branding, whether for branding purposes or performance purposes, to create by the end of the day sales. And I think right now we are at a time where every marketeer is met with a CEO saying, well, I'll try and see how much of your budget I can keep, but you need to give sales, right? You need to provide the company with positive results because these are difficult times. So we need to think more short term. And I think therefore marketing mix modeling provides a great opportunity to basically model your sales and your marketing activities, and then look at what is the contribution of each of these activities on short-term sales.
So, you have touched upon a very interesting point, and that's something that I was longing to ask you, that this is oldest debate going on, that well-established brands, right, and long-term investment of brand building versus short-term tactical investment on driving revenue, driving outcome or performance. How do you see these questions being answered through the lens of data that you collect, through the insights that you collect, and the experience that you have had in the industry of talking to consumers, talking to platform owners? How do you recommend the brand owners where to gear the ship?
So I think, to me, a brand is an asset, right? It's money you put in the bank, and when you stop focusing on branding, then you're taking money out of the bank, right? And the value of your brand will decrease over time. For me, performance and branding does not necessarily contradict. I think branding is a lot about consistency in your message, how you communicate. So I think there are a lot of ways, even in time where we have to focus on performance, where we can also focus on brands. So I think we're going to be in an interesting time where companies are focusing less on building up their brand, but the ones who have strong brands will do better because budgets are getting cut. And an interesting point is that when we're doing marketing mix modeling, you always end up being able to maybe attribute around 20, 25, 30, 40% to the different marketing activities you're doing. And then there is the rest, the base, right? That is attributed to what your company is, your customer service, what people think about your company, things like that. That's branding. Nice.
So what you're saying is it's the focus on the holistic experience that a brand gives to a consumer, right? While you may choose to invest for a short term into, let's say, media, communication, advertising, but there is a long tail of different touch points that a consumer might interact with your brand. And while you make sure those are in place, you can make sure that your brand is still stronger when you have a time when, there's no investment on the brand.
That's what I believe from the research side, but I believe that you are getting challenged on this every day, right? So how do you see that when budgets are being moved? So how are you trying to deal with that in every day?
This is one of the most difficult questions to answer, and the way we have looked at it towards the fact that it's more situational, it's more contextual, because there is no right or wrong answer to this, right? But the way to play this game is win the game where it makes the brand at least stay same strength that it used to have before, but deliver on the revenue target, sales targets, right? So whenever we are pushed against the wall to make a choice of whether to invest on a brand right away, invest heavily on a brand for a certain period, we evaluate in the context where this question is asked. To give you an example, there are brands which are so heavily dependent on certain target audience to purchase them. That's a very niche segment that they try and target, right? Now, for these brands to build or invest heavily, creating large-scale awareness would not make sense. And what we spoke about before, the fact that commerce platforms are not just now shopping platforms, but they're giving experience as well. So for such brands, we make sure that they are seen, visible on, let's say, a commerce platform, not just for the part of purchase or selling the brand, but also giving experience. That in turn builds awareness and affinity for the brand, which finally leads to conversion, right? So we try and get a balance of what we need to invest behind in a portfolio of brands from a media lens, and invest behind long-term, more established, heavily penetrated brands. Yes, we need that sustenance. But for brands which target a small segment, are generally or have a huge revenue contribution from commerce, then we move our needle just to focus on commerce. And we don't really do the full funnel. It's more funnel-less approach that we have adopted. And that's what possibly is making us still stay in the game and making our brand still grow.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. And I think also what matters a lot here is what do you optimize towards?
Correct.
Right. So I bet in the boardrooms there will be a lot less discussion in the next quarter about brand equity and how we're doing there, and more in terms of optimizing towards sales.
True. And I think the fact that we both know, right, that this two factors of sales versus brand building also go hand in hand, because as you mentioned, that media is just one of the touch points that consumers see your brand, right? But they experience the brand in many other ways, and it's the opportunity for the brand owner to make sure that those experiences remain strong for the long-term equity of the brand. So on that note, we spoke about growth, and growth is again something that has come very strongly post-pandemic, because for those quarters, a lot of companies worldwide saw decline in consumption, decline in their top line or bottom lines, right? So coming and talking about growth in every board meeting, let me bring that question up to you, that when brand owners today come to you asking about future, how to map that future, how to decide what is the next step for my brand to take that growth leap, whether it's a new brand launch, whether it's for an established brand, what metrics do you look at to map that future opportunity?
So I think that's a difficult question, but let me try and give you an example of where we are trying to move the conversation with many of the brands that we work with. I think now we work a lot in the finance space, right? And it's a very interesting market these days. We see in our latest research that everyone's competing with everyone in the minds of consumers, not so much in the minds of the brands yet, but I'm sure that will come. I think what is important to keep in mind if you are running any media budget or marketing budget in Vietnam is that we had an important birthday just a few weeks ago. Vietnam got its 100th million citizen, right? And to me, that is what are we now? 70-80% of those are online, right? We can target them. You can run big scale campaigns. Maybe now is the time to figure out precisely who you want to build your brand amongst.
Correct.
Because we are becoming a very populous country with a large and growing middle class and more spending power.
Nice.
And if you want to build a strong brand today, and you are not Unilever, then you really need to target your spending, and you need to be very aware of where that target group is going. And these are some of the things we have been having quite a few discussions with brands about during COVID and afterwards, because pre-COVID, most companies were still in the mindset of doing their users and attitude studies or segmentations like every 5 years.
Okay.
And change happens a little bit faster than that. It also happened faster than that before, but it happens even faster now. So what we are doing with one of the tools we have available is basically to have an ongoing study of consumer behavior in Vietnam.
That's great.
Yeah, so that at any point we can map the segments, and at any point you can enter with data updated just last Sunday, right? And start mapping out what are the attitudes. Are they discount hunters? Are they quality hunters? What kind of brands do they use? What kind of media touch points, e-commerce platforms, barriers, etc. And build the most successful both product development and campaign towards this target group. Nice. And I think that's what brands need to do when moving into an uncertain future. And let's be honest, it's going to be continue to be uncertain, right? Because again, everything that has shaped the past 3 years has been unpredictable. So it'll probably be the same for at least the coming year, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's about narrowing down on the target group that is dearest to you and where you believe you can grow your brand, and then develop products, solutions, services that are tailored to the needs of this group and spend within that area.
Great. Okay. So, bringing all of these conversations from how we service or provide solutions to brand owners, how do we help them grow? Bringing back this conversation to our business, to your business, Thue. And what do you see as big challenges for the growth of your business, the industry that you work with in the research part? And what do you think will enable that growth? Or how do you think tech or anything else that will help you overcome challenges that you have?
So, we work in data, analytics, describing, interpreting results for our clients, right? And I Googled a few years ago, will my job be taken over by robots, right? And I think the result was around 76% chance. I Googled my wife's job as an architect, and that was sub 30. So there's no doubt whose salary we're going to live off in the future, right?
That's good news for you.
Yes, it's good news. So I think I'll have an easier life than she will. No, but I think we are in as market research and marketing analytics, we are definitely at the center of this change that AI is already bringing today. And I think this is going to be super interesting for us to follow and to react to. I think a lot of what we are doing in our strategy, focusing on being agile, on being connected or using connected data, and being decision focused, that's the right choices in a world that will be more and more driven by AI. Right. I think also we are seeing to a higher extent that global providers of research and consulting are getting more standardized. They are able to scale across markets with great success and great profitability. We as a Vietnam-focused company, we need to help clients with the challenges they have here and now and in this market. And I think therefore with an approach where we hire the smartest people in the market, we have good discussions with our clients, we apply our thinking to their concrete problem with global tools, and using AI will be a quite good, strong proposition for the future. As long as we keep, being open towards change. Right. And I think this is I mean, people have compared it to when the car took over from the horse and so on. It's going to be a substantial change we're going to see over the next coming years. So you really need to not just be someone who embraces change, but really, really embrace it, right? And then I think we can make the jobs more interesting for our teams as well, because a lot of the simpler analytics we will be able to provide without so much human input, and it will be more about consulting, building analytical models, advising the clients, and I'm looking forward to that future. How does it look in media?
I think everything that you said, a lot of those are valid for a lot of industries and our businesses, and not so different for media, right? In fact, I see this, let's say, into two different ways in which we need to grow and what challenges, right? In the business of media, our product directly is the talent, right? And in a market like Vietnam, where there is no direct pipeline, where there are educational courses which are heavily focused on advertising, communication, media, right? Creating that talent in the market as young people who are interested in this field is where we need to make a mark. And, we have started small steps in that journey where Mindshare and Group M have started a program called Media Master. And that's where we directly collaborate with the leading universities in Vietnam. And there are courses that we have designed in the media field, in the communication advertising field, post which we actually hire those talents, train them, put them onto different businesses that we have, and make sure that they learn the ropes. So I think making sure that we are ready with our talent, making sure that that talent is skilled in managing businesses for our clients, and the fact that our clientele is a huge, diverse portfolio, where we have a commerce client to a long-established brand building client towards from a CPG to an automobile client. And each one of them have different needs while everybody is looking for growth. But the way to plan in media is different, and that's why creating the talent is. So that's the first part. And the second part, which you also mentioned, that brand owners and business owners are looking at us to tell them what the future is looking like, to help them grow and walk into that uncertainty with some bit of certainty, right? And to prepare for that certainty, I couldn't agree more about AI. So the fact that AI is here today gives us or adds great value to our decision making, to the fact how we recommend what's going to be future looking like based on analysis, quick analysis, and large scale analysis of data and insights, right? So I think both these aspects of creating talent, skill talent pipeline, and the fact that we're able to predict based on past data with agility what the future looks like for our clients is something that we also want to work. And for sure, market research, brand understanding of how they are, performing in terms of brand health track. These are huge value adds and metrics that everybody relies on to make those decisions. So I think, that brings us closer to this topic, and it was absolutely wonderful talking to you.
Thank you very much.